Welcome to the Series 1 of Virtual Ownership. My name is Abhijit Kelkar, and I will guide you through the Section 1 of Series 1 of Virtual Ownership. In this section, we cover what virtual ownership is and its uses. This section covers the what and the why part of virtual ownership. The videos for Section 1 are in two logical parts. The first part covers what virtual ownership is, explained as different facets of virtual ownership. In the second part, we will cover the uses of virtual ownership. Some helpful information before watching the videos. GEOOWN or virtual ownership is a platform for all people on this planet, all countries, and all languages. And we want to get the message of virtual ownership to as many people as possible on this planet, for which we want to have closed captions in as many languages as possible. You can enable those captions in your video settings by clicking on these two icons shown here. On clicking this icon, you select your language, and on clicking this icon, you enable the closed caption settings. So you can read the video series as we go along in your language. GEOOWN is meant for all people on this planet. So if your language is not present here, you're welcome to help us translate it to your language. So people speaking your language could get the message of virtual ownership. And you can do this by joining YouTube's community contributor program for translations. Just Google YouTube contributors to find the link. And after you have translated, your name appears in the language credits. So join the fun in getting the message across. So let's start with what is virtual ownership, the different facets of virtual ownership. As a child grows up, the first thing his parents give him is a name. Think about your name and what it means. It gives you a uniqueness to associate with the world. For most of us, the name follows us from childhood to old age as your identity with which the world recognizes you. It helps you navigate institutions from your school to your work, from birth to death. It covers all facets of your life, your school grades, your travel, your salary, your club admissions, and so on. After our death, we are recycled back to the earth. What about the goods and products we use? On a similar note, virtual ownership gives a unique identity or name to your goods and products. And this identity can be given at the manufacturer or the retailer or by you sitting in your home. And you would cover all aspects of ownership from birth to death, or rather recycle in case of products. You see those aspects on the screen like warranty, e-documents, sell, resell, buy, lost, found, repair, loans, specifications, receipts, spares, maintain, IoT framework, upgrade, recall, own, recycle, and different recycling laws like ROHS, WEEE, CEWRA, and also communication by which you communicate through your goods. The best analogy for virtual ownership will be like your name. or a diamond which has multiple facets to its identity. Like your name, a diamond has multiple facets, and GEOOWN or virtual ownership has many directions and dimensions. The directions are different uses of identity and the benefits which come with it. The dimensions are different aspects of your identity and your product's identity, like security, monetization, and the relation between them. Like you use your name in different roles and capacities as a student, as a family member, as a member of organization, and with your identity, you can do different things. Similarly, by giving a unique identity to your goods and products, you enable different processes for your products as indicated above, including some which are unique globally, like communicating with you through your goods and products. And there are others like buy, sell, IoT framework, lifecycle process, spares, and revenues. It covers all your product does from its birth to its death or recycling. Now you would have a question, is it relevant to me? As we do more and more things online, our online data is relevant and is our asset. Let's look at three aspects of our own data. The first use for you is virtual ownership to simplify your life and enable different processes for your benefit. The second is to control and monetize your data. And the third is to have an impact on the world. While the first two uses are obvious to you, the third use is interesting for your children and their children, future generations. Do we humans have a shared purpose, a shared responsibility? Let's look at other aspects and facets of virtual ownership on you and the society you live in. Will we leave this planet in a better condition than what our parents left it for us? We just have one home, and this is it. We owe it to future generations. This story is about you, about the future, and how you can take control of your data and change the world. What are the principles this is based on? Without principles, our model will not work. Virtual ownership is based on a concept called IPCD. This concept was pioneered by GEOOWN, and for interested readers, we have a video about it in section 5. Let's look at the relationship between us and the world. Many years ago, you watched a video called The Story of Stuff, which highlighted the unsustainable way in which we use the Earth's resources. While it did raise awareness, there was no solution in sight. Would it not be great to have a platform which people are interested in for their own benefit and helps make the world a greener place as a byproduct? This is the story of GEOOWN virtual ownership, where you take control of your data and your world and make it a better place for future generations. Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot is a beautiful video to watch, which gives you a perspective of our home, its dot-like place in the universe, its fragility, and on our responsibility. We are at the center of the world because if we exist, the world exists. While this is true in one sense, with our use and throw culture, it is brought forth in a very negative sense. It's as if the world revolves around us. Let's look at virtual ownership in a different way. Whatever is physical, you can have a virtual copy of it. Real made virtual. Let's play with the two words, real and virtual. And let's look at ways to combine these two words. If you keep virtual first and then real, you get virtual reality, which means the virtual is as good as the real, but not really real. Now interchange the two words. If you keep real first and virtual later, you get real virtuality, which means real has a virtual counterpart. Real comes first and then virtual. Similarly, virtual ownership is real virtuality. Virtual ownership is grounded in reality and has a real part first, after which we have a virtual counterpart. Changing the position of the two words makes a big difference. Now, let's look at two worlds. The real world and the virtual world. You exist in the real world. You also own products in the real world, like your mobile, cycle, car, your keys, your passport, your books, your certificates, and your pets like your dog or cat. You then create an identity in the virtual world like you would for an email or a Facebook account. In GEOOWN, you create virtual identity first for yourself and then for any of your product, which you think is important for you. It needs to have value for you, like the camera in yellow. And a unique identity is given for each of your products. The creation of a unique identity, which includes a category, a manufacturer, and a model, takes under 3 minutes for creation the first time, and a review process for validating that the first piece of that model exists in the real world. It works on the principle of master data reuse. Let's say there are 2 million iPhone 11 users globally. For the first user to create a virtual iPhone 11 model takes 3 minutes and review time by the reviewer to confirm that indeed a model like iPhone 11 exists in the world. But any of the subsequent 2 million users of iPhone 11 model take 30 seconds to create their unique identity. Now in this virtual ownership, you can store all documents related to your products, like your receipts, product documents, warranty, manuals, registration certificates, etc. for your products. There can also be products for which you generate an identity to associate with and which do not have their own identity, like a suitcase or bag. You can also give identity for your important documents, passports, or even books and pets. When you sell your scooter to another person, it is very easy to transfer ownership virtually, and along with it, all documents, receipts. You transfer the physical ownership of the scooter when you sell it. The same process is for your camera or any other goods. Now let's see how virtual ownership works in the real world. On the left is the real world, and on the right is the virtual world. Let's look at the real world and the whole life cycle of the product when it starts life from a manufacturer and lands up with you, and then to the end of its life cycle. For this, we select three products: a camera manufacturer, an electric cycle manufacturer, and a mobile manufacturer. In all these three cases, we have you in the picture. In case of the camera, you are the first owner. In case of the electric cycle, you are the second owner, and there is this red line which shows discontinuity of ownership. When the cycle is stolen from you and passes on to a random person. And then finally, in the mobile case, you are the third owner before recycling. We have assigned some timelines to the life cycle of the product: 20 years for the camera, 15 years for the electric cycle, and 8 years for the mobile. These, as you can see, are optimistic values. In our use and throw culture, these are not really those long. In reality, they may be shorter. Most people don't use an 8-year-old mobile phone. Do you? Let's have a look at the laws for product use and disposal. So you have laws like ROHS, WEEE, and across countries, you have different laws. Like in California, you have Electronic Waste Recycling Act or similar laws across the world. And the focus of these laws is on recycling targets. Governments all over the world are concerned with pollution of the world and the problem of e-waste. The issue is not with intentions, but implementation. However, they have no way of encouraging or enforcing it other than passing legislation. The intention of legislation is good, but there needs to be a different way to get people involved. And because of people, manufacturers will be involved. We believe people will help if their interests are aligned with the rules. Can we turn the problem of e-waste into an opportunity? Yes, you need to involve people for their own benefit. And here, each one of us has a role. I'll give you a small anecdote. We had gone to the head of green recycling of one of the largest phone manufacturers in the world. They sold around 400 million phones per year globally. And we asked this head of green recycling as to how many phones do you recycle? He had no idea. We then asked him if they could use virtual ownership to tell their customers that their phones could not be stolen. Since each phone came with virtual ownership, and in this way, it would benefit their users and also help them establish a connect with their customers over the product lifecycle. Of course, they had no clue here also. And as is the state with most manufacturers who have no idea where their products are, it was only their world and their sales. Forget what happens to the phones afterwards. After all, we are the largest phone company in the world. It was a bubble they were in. The bubble burst. It was Nokia. It is high time to change the focus from manufacturers to the overall life cycle of a product, centered around you. Now, let's look at a way a product comes to you from a manufacturer. The manufacturer sells a product to a large retailer, both physical retailer and online retailer. It comes to you or the first owner after you buy it from the retailer. Let's say you sell the camera to the second owner or buy a cycle from the first owner, or a mobile phone changes hands to a second owner. Now this goes on till we come to the third owner. Now, in case of the cycle, we have put a red divider to indicate the cycle is stolen from you. And you lose physical ownership of the cycle. So it disappears from you and lands up with a random third person. Now, this random third person may be a thief or a person sold to by a thief. The thief just wants to steal and make money. So perhaps he sells it to the fourth owner. Let's for a moment look at the graph. The x-axis represents the number of years of a product or the lifetime of a product. You have price at the start of the lifetime, and the y-axis here represents the price of a product over the years. So you have price at the start of product life cycle and a price at the end of product life cycle. The timeline represents the lifespan of the product in number of years. So this is the lifespan of the product, and this is the price at the start of a product's life when it was sold new, and this is the number of years of service of the product, and this is when the product is old and perhaps recycled. So this is called the life cycle value curve for a product. So around the world, each product has a different life cycle value curve, and depending on number of factors like brand, maintenance, etc., it varies. And around the world, people also value a product differently. Now, let's look at the recycling part, where the last owner of the cycle recycles it, and similar would be the case with the user of the camera or the mobile phone. Or it ends up in trash if it is not recycled. Further, it pollutes the lands and oceans, which is what typically happens in many countries. Now, let's go back and see what will happen when the virtual world is here. In the physical world, the products are with the third owner, and the cycle is with the person who stole the cycle. Now, in the physical world, you have lost the cycle to a random third person who has stolen it. But in the virtual world, you are still the owner of the cycle. And the cycle has a unique GEOOWN identity, which is physically etched on the cycle. So what you do is go ahead and report your cycle lost on the GEOOWN platform. The cycle data, now shown in red, becomes public and can be seen by all globally that it is lost or stolen, and the location where it was lost and stolen. If the thief in red, let's assume the third person is the thief in red, and let's show him in red here. If he tries to sell the cycle to a fourth person, the fourth person could see on public data that the cycle is stolen and is marked with the GEOOWN number here. So he has a choice to either buy a stolen product or else refuse to buy it. Now, this would have an impact globally with the way things are used. Also, insurance companies will have lower rates for insurance, as the probability of virtual ownership products being stolen goes down. Thieves avoid virtual ownership owned products or virtually owned products. However, if the person is not a thief and is honest, shown by green color, again here, he just contacts the virtual owner through the GEOOWN code on the cycle and returns it to him. So the cycle is returned to the owner, and after the virtual owner has got the cycle back, he marks it as found and removes it from the public listing. So here we have handled both cases, the lost case and the stolen case. Now let's take the cycle to the last owner as we previously had and remove the lost and found and insurance cases. Let's take the case when the camera was with you and you had generated virtual ownership for the camera. You got benefits like data about your product, receipts, repairs, recall information if the manufacturer was involved here, spares, all in one place. Now let's look at some of the other benefits of virtual ownership. Let's take the case of you as the second owner generating virtual ownership for your cycle before you lost it. So you had prevention of theft, and perhaps the cycle would not have been stolen from you. You also had free return in case it was lost. Now you as the third owner for the mobile phone, you had created virtual ownership and had recycling benefits here. The other interesting thing is, once you put data of a product as virtual data, people who own the product subsequent to you also gets the benefits of virtual ownership. So all these benefits here are shown in green. Now let's return to when the product was with the manufacturer. And let's see what happens if the manufacturer had joined virtual ownership. The manufacturer can enter data. The data is uploaded on GEOOWN pending an owner. And the product comes to the first owner through a retailer. And the first owner has a very short registration process of about 30 seconds. And he gets all data about his product on virtual ownership. Plus the manufacturer gets a connect with the first owner of the product. And when the product is sold to the next owner, a connect with him till the end of the product life cycle. All business is centered around the person. He gets perhaps the warranty, the spares, the servicing schedule of the product. And in case the product has defects and some manufacturing issues, the manufacturer could recall the product easily. The process is very easy. Take the exploding case with Samsung Galaxy Note 7 some years ago, or the issue with cars made by General Motors, which had some braking system or some system issues. These issues become very easy for a manufacturer and user to resolve. Also, the user sets how much data is shared with the manufacturer, and he may receive just information about his products and no advertising or product launches by the manufacturer. Another advantage is since virtual ownership is generated by the manufacturer, the goods are confirmed as original products, which is a benefit to the manufacturer. Take the case of a Louis Vuitton bag or a Swiss watch. Since it's an authentic confirmed product, the resale value of the product is high for a user and easy to confirm. It's also easy for a manufacturer to have touch with all owners across the product lifecycle till the end of recycling, which makes complying to all laws like ROHS, WEEE much easier. Now let's move further to see what happens when a retailer can enter data. And here too, we have the same benefits where he enters data. And as you can see, they get a connect with the first user and subsequent users also. All users benefit because of virtual ownership. Now let's move to when a user enters data. The user gets his data, and when he transfers ownership to the next owner, the virtual data is passed on to the next owner. The next owner is able to access the data of the product. If the first owner has uploaded data, then all subsequent users of the product are able to access the data as the product is transferred from one owner to another. If you are the last owner, you get the recycling benefits seen in the red box. Now let's come to a very interesting case, and that case is reusability of data. Data reusability, as we call it. Let's take this example where you create a virtual identity for your product, say the blue camera. It is color coded, so the person in blue is you, and your products are shown in blue. The person in yellow has all yellow products, and the person in red has red products, and so on. So suppose you have a specific model, a Canon EOS 250 DSLR camera shown in blue. Then it takes 2 minutes for you to create the model, and the GEOOWN reviewer examines it to ascertain that a model like this exists and approves it, and you get a GEOOWN code for that. And you become the first person who gave the model EOS 250 DSLR a virtual code. Now, any person who has a similar EOS 250D DSLR camera, like the owner shown in yellow, now he can generate his GEOOWN code in 30 seconds flat. Perhaps he likes the concept of virtual ownership and uses it for his cycle, which is a particular model, and generates a code for this model. And perhaps you have a similar kind of cycle. So in his case, he takes 2 minutes to create, and the approval time is there to approve the model, to confirm that the model is the right model. And perhaps let's say you have a similar cycle shown in blue, and you generate a GEOOWN code in 30 seconds flat. So this is master data reusability at work. Now let's take the last example of the person who owns the mobile phone and say it's the latest iPhone 10 or iPhone 11 or iPhone 12 model. Let's say the iPhone 12 model, whatever the case may be. and he generates an identity for his phone. Now, all people can generate a unique identity for their iPhone 12 model, like this person in red, or the green, or this person in brown. For a same model, suppose there are 1 million phones globally. Then all the 1 million people of these iPhone 12 model can generate their unique identity in 30 seconds by just selecting the category, the manufacturer, and the model, and generate a unique identity. Now let's take a fun case, and this is interesting, and it's the ability for a person to communicate through the goods a person owns. So in this case, the person in blue owns all these items. And here we have a random person in green, and he may need to communicate with the person in blue through his products. This person in green can communicate just by scanning the identity of the goods. So let's see what type of communication could happen here. So it could be something like a person wants to move the car away because it's blocking his doorway. So this car is blocking this person's doorway, and he wants to send a message to the owner saying, please move your car. Or it could be used to notify the owner after someone has returned the product to a specific place. Or it could be someone who has found your passport and wants to return it to you. And he sends you a message to collect it from him at a location or gives us contact details. Or it could be someone who has found your camera, or it could be a servicing person for whom you don't want to give your mobile number or email, and he can communicate with you through your car. Or it could be something like in your office colleague wanting a ride, and he perhaps doesn't have your number, and he can communicate with you, can you give me a ride at 2 p.m. if you're going to this office or whatever. Or it could be a case where perhaps someone could send you a message to avoid fines because the road has to be cleared on that day. Or it could be something like you have left an important document and you don't remember where you have left it, and the person finding it could return it to you by communicating with you through the identity of the document. Or it could be something as simple as your cat is at our place, you can collect it, or your dog is not in the kennel, or your boat is leaking, or your keys are with me. So these are different use cases. And once you have virtual ownership, it gives the ability for people to send you messages through your goods. Now, you could also turn off those messages in virtual ownership. Now, let's look at the real world with real people and the virtual world with virtual identities of real people. The virtual world is instantaneous or fast at the click of a button. The real world is slow. Now, let's look at the products. Like your personal goods, like your laptop, camera, or headphone, or your private transportation like your scooter, boat, cycle, car, or your personal items like books, keys, certificates. your music instruments, your pets, your tools, your sport equipment, your home equipment, your travel goods like your bag, purses, camper, your firearms like your pistol or gun or shotgun, your farm equipment, or perhaps construction equipment which lies in the open, or your laboratory equipment, or your industrial equipment. We have not considered many other companies like service companies, oil companies, public sector companies, government organizations which own things. But you get the scope of virtual ownership. It is universal. Let's have a look at different factors of a product. And for easy understanding, we have taken 4 scales. The first is the lifetime scale, which gives the lifespan of a product. Next is the price scales, which gives the cost of a product from start to end of a life cycle. Then you have end of life value scales, which is either recoverable or non-recoverable or a negative value. So it has either a positive recoverable value or a zero value, no recoverable value, or a negative value. And a negative value means if it is not recycled, then it has other negative effects like affecting the health of a community or causing cancer or polluting the ocean. So these kind of things. And finally, you have the recyclable scale, which means it can be recycled or not recycled. So now let's look at each of these scales. So let's look at the lifetime scales. So here, all these products have a different lifetime value or the number of years they last. Like your shoes would last for say 5 years, or ice skates, or your mobile phones, laptops would be 5 years. Your home equipment like refrigerators or washing machines could be anything from 10 to 20 years. And some others like instruments and so on could be like 50 years to 100 years. And some things are timeless, like your pets and perhaps some documents you have. Now let's look at price scales. The price scales are a variable scale which start at a higher value at the start of life cycle of a product to a lower value at the end of the life cycle. Let's look at this electric car. At its start of life, the price of the car is 55,000 euros. And after 25 years of its life, its value or price in the market is 1,000 euros. So it starts life here at 55,000 and ends its life at 1,000 euros after 25 years. Now let's look at a mobile phone. At start of its life, the price of a mobile phone may be 1,000 euros. And at the end of its life cycle, its price can be 300 euros, say in 5 years' time. Let's look at another case, a skateboard, which is shown here in green. And it has this green life cycle curve here. So its start of life price could be 300 euros and end of life price could be 100 euros. All this over 25 years of its life. This gives you a good perspective of price curves of a product over its life cycle. Now, let's look at the last two scales. The end of life scale, which means a product has a value or does not have a value or zero value, or even a negative value if it is not recycled, and a recyclable scale, which means a product is either recyclable or not. The y-axis represents if a product has positive value or negative recycling value or zero. The x-axis shows if a product can be recycled or not. The color gradient on green represents a positive and increasing monetary value at the end of its life, and the red gradient represents a negative or decreasing monetary value at the end of its life. So if it is not recycled, it can affect the environment or it can pollute the oceans and such type of things. So our whole objective is to move to the recycled part where the arrows point, and perhaps look at products where we derive value over its life cycle and we use it into its next life. Now let's look at another facet of virtual ownership. You have the real world with real people and the real world with real physical institutions as it existed before the internet age. Before, you had a bank account where you kept your money. You used your identity or your signature to authenticate and access your account. You got a service and interest in return, indicated by this blue arrow. Similarly, before the internet world, you had friends, you interacted with them and had fun. You got a great time in return, shown by this blue arrow. Or before, you went to the post office to post stuff and authenticated your identity to receive a telegram, or the postman delivered the post to you at your home and he knew your identity. You received a service shown by the blue arrow. The blue arrow represents a service or benefit you got for your identity. Now, once the internet era came and you had the virtual world, you migrated to the virtual world with a virtual identity, which became very important over a bank teller knowing your face or a postman knowing your face and address. You access services remotely. This, of course, had advantages. The access to mail changed from weeks or months with a post mail, physical mail, to seconds with an email. Your ID was critical, or identity was critical in the virtual world to access your mail, email, or access your bank account. Now you came to virtualization of your friends with Facebook or LinkedIn. Your identity was also important here. Except it was authenticate for you and revenue for them, which was fine as you didn't pay stamps for a service like post, but your data was monetized by them for the free service you used, and you did it for your convenience to save time. Now let's explore further. You use the virtual world for your convenience, be it a bank account for money transactions or your email to check mail, or to see your friends on Facebook and seek career opportunities on LinkedIn or Zing, to search something on Google. You get a service in return where it was a similar service in the physical world, like your bank account or your post. And your data is used to access that service. So you leave a digital footprint, and the only use of this digital footprint is to authenticate you for using a service. In case of others like Facebook or Google, the story is a bit different. Since you have service for free, you pay with your data. You are the product for advertisers. They get revenue on your data. However, in the future, things will be different. In GEOOWN, you use your identity to access a service or multiple services. You would leave a digital footprint, but there would be revenue flow to you. Now, let's look at another facet of virtual ownership, which is the IoT framework. You have different products like your car or other goods for which you have an IoT services. Let's say a manufacturer one who has sold you a car and provides you an IoT service. Similarly, you could have many such companies giving you IoT services, 1 to 100 or 1 to n. With virtual ownership, your car has an identity of its own, independent of your identity. And it's similar for all other products. Now, would you want to have 100 apps on your mobile to access each of these 100 services? Or do you want to have access to all these 100 services with just one identity? The model has to be centered around you and not the 100 companies' products which you have bought. The other issue is when you sell your products to another person, it should be very easy to transition the IoT services to the next customer. Like when you sell your car, this IoT service should transfer to him automatically without you having to close the service and he going through the hassles of opening a new service. Also, one identity centered around you and not around the company's products makes things easier. So you don't have to have 100 apps on your mobile phone with 100 password policies. It's just you and your identity, and the whole ecosystem is based on you. Now, finally, let's take a tour around the world to see how people across the world use products. We use real names of people in each country. Let's start from South America, Chile, then into Brazil, then into Mexico, and then North America. From there, we move to the African subcontinent in South Africa, then Nigeria, then Kenya, Ethiopia, and then we move into the Middle East, into Saudi Arabia, then go further into Europe, Italy, France, UK, Sweden, Finland, Germany, Ukraine, then into Iran, Pakistan, India, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Australia, and then we move to New Zealand, Indonesia, Japan, Russia, Korea, and then finally China. All have an online presence, all have a mobile phone, all have at least 100 products, a very conservative estimate. all use their product for an average 5 years. 80% of these 100 products will be discarded in 5 years. 80% will have issues with receipts, spares, selling, insurance, lost and found. 2 views, and most people buy products from a retailer. The bottom line, all across the world, most issues are the same. That is why we require virtual ownership. So let's now move on to the next section of virtual ownership, section 1, part 2, the uses of virtual ownership.